Hello, everybody, and welcome to RockSim Live. I am Michelle, and I'm the ops manager here at Apogee. I'm filling in for Tim, who usually does these. Um, so just checking to make sure this says my microphone's working, so hopefully sound is good and you guys can see everything there. So yeah, Tim is this week. He was at the FAI World Championships in Texas. They are basically the Olympics of rocketry, and he was there all week with his daughter, who was on the senior team. She competed Monday and Tuesday. I know how she did on Monday. It didn't go well. I don't know how she did on Tuesday. He didn't post about that, but I assume if it was great news, he would have said something. So probably not great either. But the team overall is doing really well if you check the results there. So that's pretty cool. So Tim will be back next week. And so save all your hard questions up or think of your hard questions for next week. Um, I always can take a stab at them, but I don't always like to. I don't want to give you wrong information. So if I can't answer it, I will pass it off to Tim. So if you have questions, throw them in the chat. I'm pointing it. I don't know what putting at the chat. I'm looking at the chat over here. And so I have this rocket and then it's in the way of my chat. So I can't actually see what you're typing over here. So if you have any questions, yeah, put them in the chat. I have one that Carlos submitted, or a couple questions that Carlos submitted via email. And I prepped a little bit for that. Otherwise, we'll just see how everybody's doing. We got a lot of the regulars here: Johannes, Carlos, Rosa, Mark, Terry, Andrew. So good to see everybody. Um, yeah, muggy Marietta, Georgia. Yeah, it's muggy here too. It's been a very weird summer. It's rained here. It's like Seattle here, which is bizarre because normally everything's brown and dry, and if you sneeze wrong, it starts a fire. And this year it's like raining every single day, and it's so green here. It's amazing. Although the weeds in my yard don't. I'm not super excited about the that, but it's making we're able to fly. That's great. No burn bans or anything, which is just great for Colorado. I know some of you aren't getting so lucky, but yeah, it's really muggy here today for us. So yeah. Um, so I guess I will just let's see. I need to change to my screen share here. So I'm gonna start just general stuff. Where are you? A little spacey today, so I apologize in advance. I'll explain that in a second. So, starting July 1st, our new tool of the month came out. That is a digital caliper. So you guys can see that, yep. Digital caliper here, and it's that time of day. You can get it free if you spend $75 and put the coupon code in. Make sure you put the coupon code in. People keep going, oh, but I just thought it like automatically but we don't just throw it in every $75 order because some people would end up with like 15 calipers. And some of you order very often every month. And so, yeah, so you do have to put the coupon code in, which is on the item page. It's just tool 723, so 7th July and 23 for 2023. So put that in. You can add it to your cart, put the coupon in, and yeah, it'll be free if you've got $75 worth of stuff in there. And this caliper is really cool. It's digital, which is nice. If those of you who dealt with non-digital ones, maybe you're an engineering person and it's totally fine for you. But like when I try and use it, it's always like, what is that line? What does that little dash mean? I have to, because sometimes they're kind of off. So it's nice to have just the numbers. It's kind of idiot proof, which works great for me. Um, so we use this all the time here to measure different things. New tubes or rings we get in, putting things at RockSim. Um, yeah, so it's great. I definitely recommend if you do any sort of scratch building, you put things at RockSim. It's great. If you got the What You Missed in Rocketry newsletter today, you will maybe notice if you click on the link for the tool of the month that it was last month, both the links, and I caught it. I made the error, and then I caught it when it was going out, and I thought I stopped the newsletter and resent it, but it was still going out. So I don't know. So I know the mistake I made. It's fixed already for next week. But like I said, a little spacey today. I was just doing too many things at once. So, but yeah, check this out if this looks like a tool that you might use. Free if you're going to spend $75. And you know you're going to spend $75 on our website anyways, because we've got so many cool things. So yeah, why not? Um, and it's like I said, we use ours all the time. So I don't know if everybody will, but I think it's pretty cool. Besides that, I don't think there's nothing really new that happened this last week. It's been pretty quiet with the 4th of July. This week we were closed, and then I'm sure you guys are aware as well, 4th of July week is sort of like all of us are a little brain dead um, after that. So we haven't done anything new this week, except we did release 2 new YouTube videos. One is this is an old kit, but we're kind of catching up on different things. So the Aspire, if you're not familiar with the Aspire, it is an awesome kit. It looks kind of boring. Um, so this is a cool picture, so it doesn't look boring there. But it's a nose cone, a couple of tubes, a coupler, some fins. Like that's basically in a streamer, and that's basically it. What's cool about this rocket is that if you go down to the recommended motor chart and you look at this, the first altitude, this rocket will go a mile high on an F10.8 motor. And it's only 29 millimeters, so just over an inch in diameter. It's like just over like 3 feet tall. So you don't have to have your level 1 or 2 certification to go a mile high. You can do it with a basic low power, mid power rocket. So that's really cool. The other thing, if you can't go a mile high with this, but you can go supersonic if you fly it on these like G79 motor. It'll actually go for supersonic. It'll only go 4,000 feet. Like that's nothing. But yeah, so it's a really cool rocket. But Tim, this week we released a video. Oh, I scrolled too far. An unboxing with a rocket scientist. So Tim does these videos where he takes the bag, rips it open, shows you all the parts that come in it. We have pictures here, but yeah, so he just kind of gives his thoughts on it too. So we're catching up some of these older kits, but that came out, and then the So Long kit, which we released or we started selling a couple of weeks ago from Estes. We also released the intro video that just talks about the kit, kind of general overview for it. So those 2 are new this week. Otherwise, it's been pretty slow. We are working on the glider. So if you remember, if you were here last week, come on, you know you want to open. We have this new glider coming out in a couple weeks, and we need a name for it. So we are taking names through Monday. We're going to decide on Tuesday what the name will be. So we are definitely taking names. You can um, you can submit your names. You can use the contact form on our website. You can go to our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and TikTok, and submit your names there as well. Just pick one. Don't submit them all of them. And we're pulling all those and putting them in a spreadsheet. So we're keeping track of all the name suggestions. We're also keeping track of the day and time that they were submitted because we already have a bunch of duplicates. So we wanted to be fair. So yeah, if you can think of a cool name for this glider that's coming out. So we were working on, this week was kind of instructions. We're slowly getting started on that, figuring out how, something like this is really tricky to do instructions for because there's just a lot of detail to it and a lot of parts. So I know Martin, the product designer, and I sat down and we were trying to figure out how do we even reference so many different parts and how to make that clear in the instructions. So that's all kind of behind the scenes work, but that's what we've been working on this week. Last week we released the TTV, which I have here. So I need to switch my camera and turn these off because you don't. So this is the TTV we just released. It's a pretty awesome rocket. It's a 2-stage that uses electronics to launch. So it was actually designed for the simple timer, which was updated and now has an apogee charge, like an emergency ejection charge if your rocket tilts too far. So we had to build a rocket to test it, and then we were like, oh, we might as well sell this. So it's a pretty cool kit. It has this really neat little eBay. I'm gonna take this apart, and I will never be able to get it back together again. But it has this eBay here that is super neat. Um, so giving you guys time to write your questions. I do see Andrew has one in there. So it has this like nifty little eBay that Martin designed that's got these cool little like, it doesn't look as cool as it actually is here because it just looks like an eBay sled and some couplers, but this all kind of like nests together and there's a whole little frame in there. And yeah, so it's super cool. Has this great little eBay here. You can also fly it single deployment if you don't want to mess with electronics. You just take this part off and fly it there. So yeah, so this just came out. It's super neat. A number of people seem to be buying it, so it seems like it's it's kind of a specialty item, so it's not for everybody, but it's just overall looks pretty cool. So you might check that out when you get a chance on our site. Yeah, and I'm not going to spend the half an hour it's going to take me to put this rocket back together, so I will just leave this mess here. So I will get to Carlos's questions now that he emailed in. Um, so, yeah. So the first question is talking about balsa nose cones in RockSim. So um, basically, actually here, I'll put that back up for a second. I have my rocket pre-prepped, and then okay. So when you have a balsa nose cone like this, in RockSim, it's set, depending how somebody set it up. It probably is set up, it might be set up as solid instead of hollow, because technically it is sort of solid, minus the little, hole in the middle. The question was like a lot of Rocketeers end up drilling this hole out, either they're, oh my gosh, sorry guys. I did have caffeine and sugar right before I started, so I could help that. Sometimes it's solid, sometimes it has a little hole and you want to make it bigger. So a lot of people drill that what's going on? Clicking on things I don't even realize. Yes, a lot of people drill it out so it's not solid anymore. Or you make the hole bigger because you want to lighten it up, or you want to put something else in there, some weights or something that's more dense than just the wood, um, washers or lead shot or something. So his question was basically, how do you modify something like a balsa nose cone in RockSim? And to account for the change in the center of gravity in the nose cone. There are two options to do that. Although the second one's really kind of maybe we'll use for both. But so this is the little green man. This is by Audel Rocketry. We sell this kit. It's been out of stock for at least a year, maybe longer, and we just got him back in. And it is a goofy rocket. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be going a mile high with this guy, um, but it's just a funny little one. He's got little feet, he's got little hands, he's wearing a little belt and his everything. So we just got these back in, and they're kind of flying off the shelf already. Um, he also makes a Pegasus, which the kids when they come in love these kits too. But this has a balsa nose cone, so that's why I wanted to pull it up as our example. So you can see here, and this is also a fun example of like how you can have fun in RockSim. Somebody actually, you can see in this picture, I'm trying to zoom in, my touchpad isn't. He has hands, like just like he has them in the real rocket that I have here. He's got fingers and everything. So you know what? Like you can do it in RockSim. Maybe a little goofy. It may not really be like right in terms of like physics, but you can make it look cool. So I love that he's got the little like toes and feet and everything. Although I think his toes are upside down. Um, but yeah, so for the nose cone, we'll go ahead and open this up here. And so this is a balsa nose cone, and it is solid-ish. This one has basically whoever put the screw in here, probably Tim, but you can't see this, but they poured epoxy in and just put the screw into the like epoxy plug that they poured in. So, but in RockSim, it's actually set to solid because it's basically solid. And balsa is so lightweight that the difference probably is minimal. But if you're going to drill out a bunch of it, um, then yeah. So option one is, so you've got your balsa and you take this, instead of being solid, you'll make it hollow. And then you set your wall thickness to the correct amount. So hollow, hollow we think of as like plastic nose cones, like in the TTV or a lot of our kits. And so the wall thickness is, 0.125, like an eighth of an inch thick, or maybe even thinner, or maybe a little thicker if it's a high power. So your wall thickness isn't much. This, however, your wall thickness is quite large. I didn't think to grab a ruler. And I don't know, I think this mat is in millimeters. So this is Tim's special mat. So we're gonna say, it looks like it's, I don't know, half an inch. Not great at visually measuring distance amounts, but we'll say half an inch for the wall thickness. So basically that means that, and so when I did that, I'll go ahead and change it back. When I do that, watch the mass, mass here, and then the CG. So assuming mass override isn't, so yeah, somebody's already used mass override on this, and didn't do it right. That's special. So I'm gonna turn this off. And I should have weighed this. I was running to get plywood until like right before this started, so I had to go pick up a bunch, and I ran in and got this all set up. So now mass override's turned off. So now we're gonna change it. So it says it's 4.2 grams. They said 56 grams. So clearly, well, because of the wall thickness is so bad. So if I change the wall thickness there, it's gonna say 11 grams. This person seemed to think it was 56 grams. That's probably more right, just because this is kind of heavy. So the biggest problem with this, one of the biggest problems with balsa specifically is balsa has a lot of different densities. You can actually buy balsa in like light, medium, or hard densities, and so the weight, the mass of the balsa can vary wildly based on that density. So I don't know so much about the like blocks, but I know for our sheets that we cut fins out of, it can vary wildly. So in RockSim, the RockSim database, it is going to do this. Now there should be a core. I wonder if... Okay, so this is the other option. Here, you can leave it as solid, but then there's the core, which is what we were looking at. So if the core, so you need to know how deep the core is and then the diameter. So I think the core is also about a half inch in diameter. Let's just see what this does. And the length, we'll say an inch. I don't know because it's plugged up, but so it does change the mass there as well. So theoretically, assuming the density of balsa matches your balsa part, if you put this information in, it's going to accurately calculate your mass. Since balsa is so goofy in terms of all the different densities, and even just the differences, like this is pointy, this is actually more elliptical than ogive. It's kind of in between. So what I would do honestly for this is exactly what they did. I would do a mass override, which we talk about every week pretty much. Mass override is going to be your big fix. But instead of doing a mass override for the whole rocket, because Carlos was asking about the center of gravity, calculating for that. So you'll just do it for the nose cone. And the problem is this one has a center of gravity of 0, which means that this nose cone piece by itself balances on says it balances on the tip. So if this was true, I would put my fingers here and it would magically bounce. Obviously, that's not right. So we need to I keep covering myself up, make sure you can see. So you need to find the new balance point. And this will also be affected by, like, this has an epoxy plug in it. So whatever center of gravity we find for this one may not match yours because you may not have your, um, any sort of weight in here. So, and there's two options for that. You can do the center of gravity, in the mass with your lead shot or clay or whatever you're using for your nose weight in there, or you can do it without and then add your clay, whatever epoxy lead shot as a mass object later. At the end of the day, RockSim doesn't really care as long as your center of gravity matches overall. But so we just find the balance point for this guy, and because there's a lot of epoxy in there, it's pretty back heavy, but it's probably going to be somewhere about there. So that's like what, like 2 inches back. How long does this say? The 2.75, maybe 2.5 inches. Oh, not 25 inches, Michelle. So now, and when we change that center of gravity location, so if I take that out, you can see, I'm pointing my screen, like you can see that center of gravity changes. So it went back further, because basically the center of gravity of this nose cone moved from here to here. Your overall rocket center of gravity moved back further as well. So important to have the correct, in this case, what's in RockSim isn't actually, I mean, correct in theory. I can't weigh it, so yeah, but that's how you would account for something like that. So you can try and use this. RockSim does have the capability of, you can have a solid balsa with like a plug in the middle, a hole in the middle. Um, you can make it hollow and add your wall thickness. But the big thing is the density of your material, whether it's balsa, whether it's plastic, whether it's whatever. At the end of the day, RockSim uses that density times your volume of your nose cone, um, minus the center hole or whatever, or the volume of the wall thickness to calculate the center of gravity. So it's only, like we talked about a lot, RockSim is only as good as the data that's in it. So where the density of this balsa is, where they got it from, I don't know. If you want to look up where, whoops, it's not nylon. If you want to know what the density of the balsa is in here, in RockSim, this is stored under the Rocket menu, Edit Database Materials, and then this is where all the densities are stored of every single item, like material in RockSim. So in this case, we'll go up to balsa, and this has a density of 8 pounds per foot square, or per foot, per cubed foot. Is that right? I don't know. But that's what RockSim uses. So at some point somebody said this is the density of balsa. Just looking at some of these other ones here. So you could change it, like that's the other thing you could do. You could go in here, change your density, and go back and forth and like keep tweaking your density until your calculated center of, or oh my gosh, mass is correct. Especially if you find a mass that's just like is wrong, then you can change it for all your future rockets and things. 'Cause again, I don't know where these um, densities came from. They've been in RockSim for a really long time. Not to say that mass has changed over time or math has changed over time, but it could be that, like we said, different densities or whatever. Then there's some really bizarre things in here too, like chalk. I mean, you can put chalk in a rocket for tracking powder. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I like looking through here, and over time too, we've tested weird things just for fun, and so you end up with like Bob's PVC. We put that in there one of my previous rock sims, or we just to put in a new material. Um, so that was question number one for Carlos. So basically, what I would do is I would just use the mass override. Go open up your part and use the mass override for the part and put in. So just weigh your nose cone or whatever, and then and figure out your balance point for it. Balance points are hard for things that are not symmetrical as much. Nose cone you can balance a little bit, so it's not too bad. But things like fins are really hard to do because you can't really balance a fin, even if you could kind of, it just doesn't balance because it's so skinny. So sometimes you have to kind of estimate, but yeah, so that's what I would do for if you're going to modify it. But Carlos, you can definitely, like, if you want to spend the time, I've done this before, you can go play with your density or make a new density. Like you can leave that balsa there and then you can call like Carlos's balsa and put in your densities and just start tweaking the numbers till you get it to work. I have definitely done that once or twice. It takes a very long time because you have to go back and forth and um, but if you have the time and you're kind of a numbers person, it's kind of fun to do. Um, okay, so you guys are throwing some questions in here. The second question from Carlos was Apogee sells several cameras that are used for filming model rockets. Most of the cameras are pointed down to show the dramatic liftoff and are usually set up to descend pointing down as well. Is there a launch visualizer setting or switch to let us see an entire flight from that point of view? And the answer is yes. I pull up my launch visualizer here. So this is the launch visualizer, rocksim.com. I think most of you guys are familiar with this, but yeah, you can fly rockets here for free. You can create a free account and fly rockets, slightly larger rockets, or you can do the premium plan, and then you get access to all the features, including high-powered motors, adjusting the weather and angles and things a little bit more. So we're going to start with a rocket. This is the Aspire, the one we looked at before. Oops. And I'm going to choose an engine. And let's put the F10 8 in here. This is the one that can go a mile high. And then we're going to launch it. And this is taking its time. My computer's running a lot. So this is the normal simulation. This is the side view of the rocket going up. You can zoom out and see it over. Ooh, zoom way out and see, the topography around it. But there are other camera angles besides the side view in the launch visualizer. So you can go to this little like rocket icon. If you hover over it, it shows you show camera options. And if you click on that, there's so center rocket within window. That's I think this one that we're looking at now. Then there's the show the trajectory. So this is a zoomed out view. So if it flies, come back here. Sorry, my computer is working hard running all these programs at once. So we are zoomed out really far. And I turned off, oops, I'm going the wrong way. I turned off some of the tracking stuff because of the camera view. Lost it completely. So there's a trajectory view somewhere, but I think I have all my tracking turned off, so you can't see it. Okay. We can come back to that in a second when we run out of questions, and I can fix that so it looks right. Also, so then the oh, there we go. Okay, that little thing shows up so you can recenter it on your rocket if you lose it like we just did. So there's the trajectory view. Then there's the camera is mounted on the rocket view. So when I click this is exactly what Carlos is asking. I have a camera mounted on my rocket looking down at the ground. What does the camera view look like? So This is what, so this big orange, yellow thing is the launch pad. So it's sitting on the launch pad, and then we click play and we take off. And I turned the smoke off because if you have the smoke on, you can't really see anything. I did leave the flame on just kind of to show you guys, but so we're looking at the ground. We're looking at the ground, and then eventually our recovery device pops out, and now we're coming down. So this is your ground view. You can't zoom out from here. This is like the view. You can try and it bounces back and forth. Um, but yeah, this is your view of the ground as you come down. See, so we're coming up on the cars here, and paused it. So yeah, so this camera view, if you haven't played with this before, can be fun, just for different perspectives. So there go all the launch vehicles um, as we're slowly drifting downward here. And then the final camera view is the ground observer view. This is what you see from the ground. So if we switch this, oh, I don't know what happened there. Apparently we see lots of dark sky. Okay, there we go. Okay, just thinking about going. I keep messing with it. So this is bye, Rocket. See you again, hopefully at some point. So you're just the blue is because you're looking up at the sky, and because this is going a mile high, this is pretty much what you're gonna see when the Aspire goes into the sky. And then you see the little dot. It's really, really tiny, but there's a little dot because I turned off all the tracking stuff. So that's the rocket descending back down slowly. Um, so yeah, so those are all the different ones. Obviously, this would be a little bit more fun, the ground observer view, if you have a larger rocket that doesn't go quite as high for this one. And then let's see. Whoops. Ah. So in this case, we went 4,906 feet. So we didn't quite get to our mile high. Might be because of the wind or the weather here. Not sure why, but yeah, so that's flying that. So yes, Carlos, you can absolutely do a camera down view in Launch Visualizer. You just have to change your camera view. And then if you want to, you want to look at some of these, like the camera view, and you want to turn off your smoke, because if you have smoke on, all you see is smoke until it all drifts away. You just go to your settings here, and you can do this in the big Launch Visualizer window or this little small one, and you go to flame and smoke, and this is where you would show the flame, the smoke for thrust, so when it's going up, and then the tracking smoke. So that's when it's coming back down to see it. That's the one that would have been handy in my other view. And you can change the colors of those as well. So your smoke can be neon pink or lime green, whichever one you want. And you can also change the duration of the smoke, so how long it takes to like drift and then disappear. So you can turn all those on depending on the view. If you're doing top-down view, the camera view, you probably don't want most of this on. But if you're doing like the side view or the ground observer view, then this will be really handy to keep an eye on it as you go. Let's turn those back on. And oh, I didn't do that. And when you do that, it becomes effective immediately. So you don't have to like rerun your simulation. See, now we're looking at smoke. Lots and lots of smoke. That's what we're getting a camera angle of. And some of your camera recordings probably look just like that. But yeah, so that's for that. Okay. And that's Carlos offered to, I think, buy me coffee or something to keep me awake in these two. That was his third question in the email. So I appreciate that. this is usually kind of my lunchtime, so I get a little low on energy sometimes. So looking for questions here. Yep. So, yep, it's me again. Let's see. Okay. So Andrew asks, what is the best design for a tumbler? I'm working on an egg lofting tumbler. Probably impossible. So you can do you can do tumble recovery in RockSim. Let me stop this. Otherwise it's going to run in the background and soak up even more energy. Open a rocket that I know has. So you can do tumble recovery in RockSim. Whether the or some, yeah, I mean, if your whole rocket is tumble recovery and you don't have anything at all in there, then RockSim is going. You can still do it, but RockSim's going to say it crashed because you didn't have a parachute or stream or any sort of recovery deploy. Um, I think so. That is the one thing that will be funny if you have no. Oh, let's save it. Okay. If you have no recovery device in your rocket, RockSim will always say it crashes because I mean that is what tumble recovery is too. It's crashing, just sort of very daintily crashing. Um, for that, and the other thing with tumble recovery is your descent time. It's hard to say if it's going to be accurate because even if you know the coefficient of drag of your booster and you know how slow it's falling, there's always thermals and wind and angles and things, how it falls off the rocket, if the rocket's straight up versus an angle where it might. So there's always different factors. So there's a little bit of that in there, you can get some of the information, but you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt. Get your data, go fly it, see how it kind of times out, and then you can come back and back your data back into RockSim to make it a little more accurate. So the way you do this is, let's see. So you have to set up your rocket as a two-stage, obviously. And so your booster stage, like this is the rip roar. I think we're missing normally it has the wrap on here and it's missing, so that's why the body tube is weirdly white. So the bottom stage, tumble recovery, it does tumble recovery. The upper stage has a parachute in it. Yeah. So we're gonna load our motors in here. So 24, so we'll just do D12. 5, and I'm lazy, so I just do load all and then change the delay to 0 for the booster. And then we launch. And so we've got our 2 in there. And so what it's going to do in your 2D flight profile, this is really small. I ran that really fast too, I know, I'm sorry. So we're going to launch it. And then you can see very, very, very tiny, here's the booster that's tumble recovering down for that. So you can do that. To get the actual data for the booster, that is not going to be in your flight simulation because this just does total. So if you double click on your flight and you go to the data, the details, it's going to have time to landing. That's going to be max time to landing. That's when the last piece lands. And recovery system, this is going to be your parachute. So your booster isn't going to have any information here. What you have to do is go into your graphs and graph the data. And then you can see different things, but it's not really designed to track like two pieces that way, because most people don't really care about the booster tumbling so much. So I guess they just made that decision early on for that. But the other thing you can do if you don't like the crash, if you're doing 100% tumble recovery, so you don't have a parachute in there at all, but you don't want RockSim to like crash. It says it's got the nice little parachute here. Is you can put a parachute in your rocket um, that like you could just make up a fake one that is really small and doesn't really have any impact on it. So that it's going to fall kind of with almost like without a parachute, but it won't necessarily like crash. So you can either select a really small one from the database, or you can just make your own parachute. So it depends on if you care whether or not you get that crash. Um, some people, if it's not a real crash, it doesn't matter, but it bugs me when they crash. Um, so my outside diameter will say, is 1 inch, and it's got a spill hole of 1/2 inch. The big thing will be your coefficient of drag. It always assumes 0.75. You're going to put it in your part. I'm on 3D view, so this is weird, but location. You can pick your shroud line material. Doesn't really matter. We're just looking for something that has basically no mass and is really just gonna. And then here you can kind of play with the descent rates too of like what you think the tumble recovery will be. You can if you actually know, like say you've flown it and you're like, oh, this rocket when it tumbles tends to take X amount of miles per hour or feet per second or something. You can actually put that in here too and just overwrite it. So that would be the other way to kind of go about that. If you wanted to have it simulate a little bit nicer looking. Tim may have another idea on that, but yeah, so you can kind of do that way. Um, so I don't know if that answers what your question was, Andrew. I don't know exactly, you also say what is the best design for a tumbler. I don't know if you were just meaning like how to make an egg wafting tumbler rocket in general, not in RockSim. That would be tricky. A lot of us have done the physics projects of with eggs of, cars hitting walls or like things falling off roofs or whatever. And basically you have to find a way to make it tumble so slowly and have your egg be so padded because even if you have really great padding, that rocket's just gonna, smack down really hard and so you have to figure out a way to make your rocket slow down without a parachute or a streamer. Um, there are things like drag brakes, which are kind of like fins that pop out after the rocket, but that's still a recovery type. That's not tumble technically, but something that maybe deploys, whether you've got like a burn string when your motor ejection charge goes off and then it pops out, kind of like a helicopter or something where you've got wings or anything you can do to slow that rocket down. Um, Somehow that's really what you're looking for if you're going to try and tumble with an egg. I don't know if it's possible. Most people, are looking at giant parachutes and things to slow them down, so I don't know about that. So Terry says there's a gymnast rocket that tumbles well, so maybe that's something to look into. I've never heard of that one. Finger pincher glider for the glider. Yeah, it does look like it could do that. Definitely. Um, so our Kaplan 100 says, what material do you select for 3D printed PLA nose cones? I don't think we have that as an actual, which wouldn't explain why you're asking, um, material in here. Um, if there's a material you don't see in here, there are several options. One is you can find one that has a similar density. So just like Google what the density is of your PLA, or take one of these and kind of play with them so you get them right, kind of like we were talking about with the balsa of just like playing with the numbers or using a mass override. Um, so it may be that like some of these PLA is kind of heavy-ish on the heavier side, so I don't know how much it really differs from like polyethylene, polypropylene. So you could use one of these and play with the wall thickness till you get to kind of where your 3D printed part is. There are additional materials in the database besides that, like you notice chalk was not a material on that nose cone. You can go to your database, materials database, and turn on other materials. So say I had a nose cone made out of chalk. I don't know how you do that, but um, you can turn that on for nose cones. And what you do is you find your material and then you scroll to the right and actually now I forgot they changed this, so you can click edit. This is the new fancy option. And then you'll turn it on for rocketry use. I have no idea why this column is here because it makes no sense because every material that's in the database clearly is for rocketry use, but I just always check it. And then you can check which types of parts that the material will show up on. So, chalk, obviously you don't make body tubes out of chalk, so you would leave that unchecked. But let's say for fun, I want to say nose cones can be made out of chalk. So I will check that and then click done and okay. And now I think it should be real time. Yeah. So now chalk is an option for your nose cone. So you can make it out of chalk if you can figure out how to do that. Um, so you might be able to go through here and so kind of you might be able to find a material in here that is in here that you just didn't realize. I don't think PLA is in here because this database is, like I said, pretty old, and PLA is relatively new in the history of RockSim. That's something I should write down. PLA, writing it down as a possibility of putting that in for the next RockSim build, since there is a lot of that. For that. So and then the third option, if you can't make one of those work, is to literally find out the density of PLA and come in here and add it to your database. So you would just go to the same place, click add new, and then at the bottom it will create a new line and you'll write PLA and maybe some definition because maybe I don't know how much PLA varies in density. There may be different kinds. I don't know. But so you might do that. And then you select your density units, whether you're doing, pounds per cubic feet, um, things like that. So you'll just select whichever one you want. You'll put in the actual density one. I would just leave this none. And then this is all not really in use. And then remember to click your rocketry use box and which I'm going to confuse myself if I actually turn this on, and then I think my density of PLA is correct, but click the box and click OK. And I have no idea if that worked. Oh, yep, there it is. Cool. So now I have my fake PLA in there. So that's what I would do if you've got a lot of things that made out of PLA. If you can find out kind of a common density, you can do that. And then within that, you can tweak your wall thicknesses again, like we were talking about before, for that. Let's see. Mark says, if I have changed data files in RockSim that I don't remember, how do I get the original default data back? So to factory reset RockSim, does this reset the data files? That's a good question. So to factory reset RockSim, you'll go to your RockSim menu and preferences. This might be under edit in Windows, I feel like. I'm on Mac, but click through your menus till you get to preferences. And then you go to the miscellaneous tab and then you factory reset. This says, are you sure? This is going to reset all your preferences for sure. And then once you've done that, RockSim will restart. So let's see, Mark, if I have Okay, so my materials database still has my saved files. So that didn't change. And then, oh, that cleared out my recent. Yeah, I forget how much I've changed too, and then I go do this, and it's like, oh, that was important. Um, and then the other question, if you're talking about your rocket files, it won't reset those for sure. If you're talking about your motor files, um, I feel like it's not going to reset those either. But let's see, what am I looking for? And yeah, quest. These are new. So I don't think it will reset your actual data files either. It just resets kind of like the general things. There are two. Let me check one thing. Let's go look at my actual database files, see if they have a date updated here. Library, Sun Mac, had a date here. RockSim 10, today at 2:50, data. Okay, so this is the one I just changed. May 2nd, yeah, these are all the files. So it doesn't update your data, any of your data. So Mark, if you want to get the default files back, there are two options. One is to go to the hidden file where the data is. So on Mac, to get there, you go to the Go menu and you hold down the Control button. You'll see, no, option, and that library will show up. It's a hidden folder. And then you click on it, and that will take you to the hidden folder. Then you can go to Application Support, Apogee Components, RockSim1 _1 data. On Windows, it's under Users. Let's see, I actually have it. RockSim, loading in. So Windows, it's going to be users, username, app data, local, Apogee components, RockSim. This will be _1 for 10 data. And those are hidden. So if you have hidden files hidden, then you'll have to turn them on. There's an option on Windows at the top of the screen that lets you do that. You just view and then hidden folders. So because you can't get past the username without that. So get to your data folder. And then what you can do is you can actually delete all of these. I'm going to do this instead because I have updated my, oops, come on. I have the updated motors that I gave the programmer for the next time we do RockSim updates. Come on. I freaking hate this new Mac operating system. It has so many weird things in it. So you can go in and actually delete all of the data in here. And then quit RockSim. This should work. Fingers crossed. If I reopen RockSim, this is supposed to. That's because I have the folder open. It's supposed to check if you have all your database. Maybe I need to delete the folder. That's probably what I needed to do. So there is like a hidden data folder that has all the defaults. So let's actually delete this file. And then reopen RockSim. I think I'm breaking RockSim because I'm deleting program files when it is open and it's not liking that. Okay. Now if I reopen RockSim, there we go. So you have to delete the data folder. So if you delete the data folder from that hidden location, now it puts the default, except it didn't. It's supposed to put the default file back. I don't know why this isn't working. Option 3, if you do something like I just did and you delete all of your data, and you no longer have all your data files, and for some reason they're not reloading, they are also on the website under How to and Guides, Software, loading missing motor files back into RockSim. This is not just the motor files, but this is what started it due to a bug. So you can download the motor data files. This is going to be old. I need to update this. A little out of date, but it's got most of it. Enginevendors.dat you need to delete or to download because that is all of your engine manufacturers. And if you don't have those, RockSim is going to freak out. And then your parts and materials database. So these are the default. So you're going to download all of these, unzip them, and then you're going to put them in that data folder for that. So those will definitely be clean ones. And like I said, this should repopulate because it's supposed to check and make sure there is the data files are there every time. And it did check, it just didn't put the files there, and I'm not sure why. So I need to check that. But you can, yeah, if you ever need the RockSim files, you messed up your database, you played with it too much, and now everything's goofy. You can go on the website, like I said, How to and Guides, Software, Loading Missing Motor Files will take you to this page, and this is where like the default files are stored. So that will always work, and you can always swap them out in your file for that. Let's see here. If we have any more questions. Johannes is watching Venus fly around in the sky. So, 3D printer guide. Do you guys in the States have to keep your motors stored in a location away from stuff? I have a shed at the other end of the garden to store them safely away from the house. I'm in the UK. And Terry says we don't. Yeah, I did restart the program, but for some reason it wasn't. Try again. Factory reset. Because when you factory reset, it restarts the program for you. So maybe you were commenting before I got there. Yes, you can store motors in your house. Most people put them in like their garage or something here in the States. Yeah, there was a lawsuit. I keep saying 10 years ago, but I think now it's been like 15 or almost 20, where the National Association of Rocketry and I think the AAA Association or Rocketry Association actually took the government organization, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, Explosives, to court because they were trying to call rocket motors explosives, and the rocketry community was saying, "Oops, I crashed." And the rocketry community was saying they don't explode. Rocket motors, they burn. They don't, like a firework goes boom. A rocket motor doesn't go boom. I mean, even if there's CATOs, it's not an explosion. It's just usually because something overpressurizes and fails. But, rocket motors burn. And if you can see how they burn, I can even pull up we have a cool little animation here. So this is a black powder motor. This is how black power motor burns. So you put the igniter in, you hook it up, and it ignites, and then your black powder burns like linearly there from the rear to the front, and then in your delay burns, and then your ejection charge goes off. So you guys all know this probably because you're rocket people. So we saw it burns, and composite motors are similar. They just burn in like 3 dimensions instead of like left to right kind of. So there was a whole lawsuit about it. It was a big deal, blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, the rocketry community won. And so the ATF no longer calls them explosives. They're called flammables because they do catch fire and they do burn, but they don't go boom. Um, so that opened up a lot of options because you used to have an explosives permit to have rocket motors because they were explosives. Now that they're not explosives, you don't have to have that. That being said, the Department of Transportation in the United States still considers them an explosive, which is why we have special rules for shipping motors. They have to go ground mail. Can't put them on an airplane. That makes sense. Can't put them in your suitcase either. Um, and then different sizes, different amounts of it require different shipping types, whether it's hazmat or it just goes through the post office as a dangerous good. Um, so there's a bunch of different rules. So that you will see if you do order a hazmat motor, it and you get it from us, it will say explosive on the outside of the box. If you ever noticed that before, that is why. Is because the Department of Transportation, the guys who run the trucks and the shipping and all that stuff, they still can call it an explosive for their reasons. I don't really know why, but it's it's not worth having a lawsuit when it's not really causing a problem because they do let us go through and there's some permits that allow us to ship differently. So that's a lot more information than anybody probably needed about shipping. But yeah, so you can store motors in your house. The rules get a little funny when you talk about igniters because technically igniters are still classified under the rule, the like kind of explosive rules, but there's kind of an understanding there because you can't fly motors without igniters. So there's sort of an agreement, unspoken agreement there, I think, for those. And transporting them gets weird in your car, but it's all kind of same thing. So Carlos says he stores his motors in an army surplus ammunition box. Yeah, a desiccant you can put. So just because you can put rocket motors in your house doesn't mean you should always put them in your house. Sometimes that's the only place you have. You gotta live in a house. You live in an apartment. Like, what are you gonna do if you live in an apartment and you have rocket motors? So there's only so much you can do. But you can get, like he said, an ammunition box, like a metal box that they put, like when you have like gun ammunition and things, you can get those, a magazine. Um, so you can store it. So at least it's in a separate area there. The other thing about rocket motor storage is that specifically black powder motors are heat and moisture sensitive. Like Carlos was saying, he puts desiccant patches in there. He's in Georgia, which is super humid, so that makes sense. Humidity can affect the black powder in motors. And so if you put them in like your garage and it gets really hot and then really cold, it can cause cracks in the propellant and that can cause a KTO. So, the more temperature controlled you can keep them, the better. The more humidity controlled too. Like he said, he puts it in a rubber, a box, a metal box with rubber in it. So it's basically sealed, and then he puts desiccant pouches to soak up the moisture to kind of keep them. So those are all ways to, kind of improve your storage. And obviously, if you have like an outdoor metal metal box somewhere, we actually store our motors in shipping containers that we have outside the building. Because surprisingly, the insurance company doesn't like motors in the building. So especially we've got a bunch of them, so we store them outside in metal shipping containers. So they're giant magazines. So that's how we store ours. Um, but there are definitely people who store them. There was a guy like 10 years ago who was here in town and he had them stored under his bed and they caught fire. And everybody kept calling us to ask if it was Tim. Uh, and Tim's like, I don't store rocket motors under my bed, so it's not me. So I don't really recommend, if you can help it, storing them in places like that. But sometimes you don't have a lot of options there. So, yes, I have rambled on quite a bit today, and we are at 3:05. So, I think we are done for the day. Tim will be back next week, so you guys can ask him all your questions. He'll probably talk about the World Championships. So, if you have questions about those, how they went, what his experience was like, he usually gets really interested in seeing what the other countries are doing. Some of these countries invent some cool, they come up with new ideas for like piston launchers. That's a big area that people are kind of trying to improve. How to get lightweight rockets, how light can you go, things like that. So he usually comes back with some cool ideas, and then usually there'll be a newsletter article about it too. But you guys can ask him about his experience, see how it went. I have not really heard from him at all this week, other than he posted on our Apogee Facebook page once or twice, um, and that's it. So he's been busy down there, and yeah, so I think that's everything for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for asking questions. I don't know if some of these were sort of like softball lobs to me, or if you really did need to know these information, but even if you didn't, somebody else probably did. Um, I got to play with the balsa nose cones. I hadn't really done much with that. I knew kind of how to work it, but hadn't done that before. So there's just a lot of fun things, and it's always fun to pull up rockets like the little green man that are um, fun to see how people get them in RockSim. So I think that is all for today. And if you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel, subscribe, my little button there. And we will see